Today's sponsor is Coastal Crypto. Coastal Crypto can be found at coastalcryptomining.com via the affiliate link down in the description below. They don't want to take up a lot of your time, and neither do I, because I want to get into the video. They are here to help miners find parts. If you're looking for ASICs or even GPUs or any other parts, be sure to check them out. Use promo code SOAT at checkout for 5% off any purchase on the website. Here we go, everybody. We got Mr. Bits. So tell me, how are you feeling about the merge? We're looking right now, it's looking like we got like 770 terahash or so still sitting on Ethereum. And we are already seeing a majority of these networks become pretty much unprofitable or close to unprofitable. How are you feeling about this?
I mean, I wish them luck. We'll see if it gets through first assertion finality. I think that's going to be the big piece right now. We've seen it on the testnet have some interesting effects. And this is the first time that it'll actually merge something that is equivalent to production quality. So, I mean, from the proof of network, our proof of work side, we'll see over the next few days. Obviously, there's been some coins doing pretty decent from a growth standpoint when you look at things in a vacuum, like 100% up on the Raven coin. A few of the other ones are 30-40%. We both know it has to at least 10x to be equivalent to what Ethereum's current profitability would be even. So, I mean, that's a little interesting to see. I don't see any of those 10xing anytime soon. That would be a lot of capital coming back into the market as a buying the event, because we're now at it's past the news point, right? This is the buying of the news. We're at the event now. So, we'll see. I mean, I hope but for Ethereum to be successful in this, because if it doesn't, it's like a scatter grenade. It's gonna impact a lot of things. So I think for everybody, it's a little bittersweet, obviously, for anybody that's invested in this space for a while and upheld this network. But it's also like I'm ready for the next thing.
Right. And so like two parts to that. One is like, I think the price discovery is there for Ethereum, but I'm not sure it's there for the other proof of work networks. And that's because if we look at the way the halving schedule affects Bitcoin, typically we don't see that realized until like 6 months to a year into it. And so if we're going to say that, that cost to mint a new coin on these other proof of networks is realized later on down the line, I don't think we see a fully realized proof of work, or these proof of work coins fully realize their price potential for another 6 months to a year. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's also just discovery of like what's in the realm of possible with some of these. So a lot of the growth from Ethereum standpoint from March of 2020 was $86 to its explosive growth past its all-time high, and then on to $4,000 wasn't just hype. It was because they actually had some delivery on functionality when it came to DeFi initially, with liquidity pools, people locking stuff up, to its kind of a split in the initial locking up stuff on Beacon did have some effect on that also. And then you had, all the NFT stuff that I don't think anybody would attract. I mean, I was in the early NFTs before they were even calling them NFTs, right? When we were picking up like crypto kitties and all that kind of stuff, and it froze up the network in 2017. Like the utility, essentially what they showed is utility does negate potential price because you have that volume drive, right? So, I'm interested to see some of these other networks that can show that same kind of utility from just their functionality, what Flux is doing with some of the asset stuff that Raven's doing with the Ergo's having its own thing of approach when it comes to, what they're doing with some of the assets and, the growth that they've seen recently and the focus they've seen recently too. Does those use cases prove out to be able to have a parallel economy with Ethereum, be complementary in some cases? And people look at it from, just what's in the realm of possible. So I think them pushing the envelope on that, the proof of use of work, all that kind of stuff, we've seen that attempt with like Golem on Ethereum. I still think that, and Render Coin, we've seen some functionality on that. But I think that's kind of the focus. It isn't just the pump mentals token economy kind of thing. It has to have some functionality and some true use case stuff. And then I think it starts to, it grows horizontal. It grows the stack horizontally. It's not a vertical growth like we've seen with just tokens and just getting 10x's, 20x's. It's got to have some utility behind it. So that's kind of where I'm focused currently, because now we're at that level. Like I couldn't have this conversation in 2017. The stack wasn't that mature, right? EVM on Ethereum wasn't a fully mature yet. There was Ether Delta was about as far as we got on, DEX. It wasn't even DeFi. It was just the ability to exchange between tokens without having to use a centralized exchange. And we've seen the evolution, and a lot of the inheritance of that functionality has moved over to a lot of these other tokens. Can they do it better? We thought Solana, could have done it, and it was actually proving it for a little bit, and then it froze up. And then it proved why low fees. And you look at why Satoshi in the early days was talking about the risk of low fees was people could spam it, right? There's the penalty for failure was next to nothing. It's like just you could saturate the stack with a lot of communication, and you would see what happens like with Solana, where people would attack it and it freezes the network up, and then it starts to show the federation and the centralization when you're like, hey, everybody just run this piece of code and we'll refix it and reboot the network. And then you start to see, well, wait a minute here. How can you take a decentralized network and then convince everybody in a second to reboot it, right? So, I think all those lessons learned are going to beget the next, it's the roadmap for a lot of these tokens, and we'll see. And the discussion is really going to come around, does proof of stake, is that the owning the piece of exercise equipment and saying that you're doing something, or is it the proof of work where you're actually going and doing work and there's energy involved and there's commitment to it, and it's a participation game, not so much a money game. Can you stake something and you go to the least line of resistance to a cloud because the economy's set up that way? We're gonna find out. It's a bunch of game theory going on right now. So I'm interested. I mean, like a lot of people are like, are you all upset or depressed with this kind of space? It's like, hey, when you have a business model and it's been affected and it has a real effect on people that have especially went full in this, it's like, how do you pivot? And I think part of that is just taking the knowledge that especially if you've been in this space, helping other folks that are in the same kind of position to get better structured and diversify some, and then just kind of lean in to understand that stack better, point out the errors or the issues in it, be transparent in that, help them improve it. And then we'll start to see, the use cases come up for these proof of work coins. Because we know that the consensus mechanism, it's been running in Bitcoin forever. It's been running on a lot of these, it's what's held up Ethereum. We know that part's sound. I mean, that it's been running for 12 years plus, and that basic structure is there from a security architecture. Now, what kind of functionality can we build on top of that?
So I have one big question for you, because I do want to make sure I get this in before, because obviously we could talk about the future, but what is Carter doing right now? What is Bitsby Trippin doing right now with his GPU mining farm?
So I haven't split off on all three of the coins right now, learning more of what I can on Ergo. We do have some of the NVIDIA cards on Flux right now. I was tweeting out that today. We're actually going to be talking to Dan Keller and Davey tomorrow. Is it tomorrow? Yeah, it's still 10:50 here. So yeah, tomorrow evening to try to understand Flux a little more. And then the AMD gear right now is pointed to Raven. I've been playing a lot with that, trying to figure out the most power efficient, because Raven Kapow uses a lot more power if you let it. So it's a matter of configuring that. Now that's a lot less profitable. Our power is pretty decent, and in our area is a good power rate right now. We haven't really been affected by the price increases, which has been good. And with our the Bitcoin mining farm that we're building right now, we're taking advantage of that good pricing. So it allows us to stay operational a little longer. But again, as we start to see it start to peel any sort of ability to pay for that, then some of that stuff will get powered down. Why, we watch the market have an effect. We'll focus primarily on the BTC side and then just spec mine what we can with a few of the rigs until it makes sense to, turn them back on. So it's the same thing what happened in 2014 for me, when essentially A6 took over Script. And really, I had Feathercoin and I had Vertcoin and a few others, Darkcoin, which ended up turning into Dash. And we had a few rigs. Like I was up to 13 at that time, machines, which wasn't a ton at that time. Well, it was a ton at that time. There was a lot of people, more than 13 rigs at that time, but and most of those were like 4-car rigs, but it was a pretty sizable investment at the time, but it was still like $1,200, $1,500 power bill. And then, I shut some of those down, got into some grid seeds for a little bit. And then, when Ethereum came back on, we went full scale. So, I mean, some of them were down for almost 6+ months. You see that in the channel. I've been making videos on YouTube on this stuff since 2013. So it's like, you see those kind of cycles when things are a little powered down, and you still stay in the space. You try to figure it out. It's a good time to clean. We've done a lot of that. We were doing that ahead of time. I mean, that's what the videos were. We're showing people how to kind of get in there, clean their stuff, and then get ready to modernize.
And speaking of that, make sure that everybody knows Mr. Carter from Bitsby Trippin here. He is the OG cryptocurrency miner on YouTube. So make sure you guys go follow him. I've linked his YouTube channel down in the description below. Lots of good information over there. And where else can people find you? I think on Twitter. I may have gotten it wrong, but is it Bitsby Trippin on Twitter?
Yeah, it's Bitsby Trippin.
Okay,
yeah.
I got it.
I mean, there's a ton of like spam account versions, but I think we have like 26K followers on there, so it's that's the one that you want. There was actually somebody that made a fake account on us, and they had like 130K followers, and I was like, wait a minute here, like, why are you burning a 130K account on us? And like, I felt kind of like that was cool, but like it's the wrong one, and they're trying to scam people. But yeah, there's we've been on there for a bit too. So yeah, I mean, most of our stuff was observe report type of stuff, and we're doing the larger Bitcoin mine farm video over the next few months, and taking people through that too. So if they want to see kind of a cradle to grave on just all the things that we've had to do to get, I mean, I started that project in August of last year, so we're just over a year to get the power rate where we needed it. Working with the power companies, establishing a rate, working with power brokers, all that stuff is going to be out there and how we did it. And just everything, all the nuance from permits, county, just there's so much nuance to get a farm set up if you're going up into the megawatts of level. I've learned that. Compared to what we had up in Wisconsin was pretty straightforward. I mean, we asked for a little over a megawatt, and once you're over a megawatt, it gets really complicated. Like you need switch gear, you need all this other stuff, you need a different level of permitting. If you go over 3 megawatts, you're usually your own substation. So we've had to go through all that, and that's what we're going to be taking people through. Just trying to be, transparent, show that what it takes to do that level. And if people are trying to get into that. So that's what we're going to be covering here coming up. And then obviously watching and talking as much as we can on the GPU side of them, but it's near and dear to my heart. I picked up a couple GPUs today because they were so cheap.
Nice. What'd you pick up?
We'll see what we can. So I picked up one more 3090 Ti, which is not ideal for mining by and large. That was a little probably selfish to put in a gaming box.
Throw them on Caspa.
Caspa? I have not tried Caspa.
Well, so, Caspa is one of those, it's like Bitcoin, where it's going through the evolution of CPU to GPU to FPGA to ASIC. So it's gonna
Exactly.
be to a point to where it's good on it right now because it's core heavy, right? And then eventually ASICs are gonna take it, and you're gonna be done. But there's a little bit of opportunity right now. So
Yeah, I mean, there's evolution. I think actually everything. At the end of the day, when people look at the evolution of just mining in general, if there's enough liquidity in something, like if one of these, let's say Flux or any of these tokens get a huge amount of liquidity, let's say they really have a breakthrough on users and the coin goes parabolic, you're going to have the incentive for somebody to try to build something. And we've seen it even with the memory hardness of, F hash, and they're saying, you're never going to get the advantage. And even if you look at it, it's not complete orders of magnitude better. It's, 2.5 times better if you look at the Jazz Miner and a few of the others. But it's not, like the jump from GPU to like a Bitcoin, even first or second gen ASIC, right? So even Kapow, like you can optimize all of them to where it would be at least 2 times, if not 3 times better. So if the incentive's high enough, you're always going to have that cycle, I think. And we've seen what happens when somebody directly attacks that cycle with like Monero, right? And it kind of falls away. Like I think what it does is alienates both sides a little. So it's going to be interesting, coming forward. But I'm a big, long time believer of GPUs just purely from the participation side. Like,
what do you think about all that and everything that came out about, HUD 8 basically saying NVIDIA sold to us directly. They gave us, GPUs that nobody else has access to. I mean, they frankly, they came out and said that specifically. They like quoted that. I mean, which was kind of a little crazy to come out and be that forward about it. I felt like a little cocky too. But that aside, do you feel like that is going to be more common moving forward? Those partnerships between GPU manufacturers and mining companies specifically, and how do you feel like that will inevitably impact the participation?
Well, I think it's how they try to sell in what the use case is, right? So if you look at something like HUD 8 and you look at the design of their particular GPU stack, they have a very high core CPU. They have a lot of memory, and they have like a fiber channel back end. So they were looking at the hedge play of go with a high enough CUDA core count to where if they did want to pivot to like cloud services and do some other kind of ML, training type of setup, if it's PyTorch or any of that, they can pivot those machines quickly to a job like that. So then that was kind of the sell hook to NVIDIA to say, build us something that makes sense around this stack. But we're also going to do cryptocurrency mining. So they didn't. Otherwise, NVIDIA would have looked at them and said, "We'll just buy the A 100 or like their typical Ampere high end, expensive $10,000 card." And they're like, no. We need the price point at this point. We need it to do these particular functions, but we want to be able to pivot. So I think it all comes down in that messaging. If it was just purely crypto, I would think they would have even if they were going to commit to a large purchase and order, it's a lot of risk for companies. Just seeing what we're seeing, kind of, I want to say even behind the veil, but seeing what we see from like trying to interact with, if it was AMD or NVIDIA before, going to CES, talking to some of the engineers, it all came back down to like what the use case had to exceed more than just crypto for them to want to commit to it because of the risk of what we're seeing with like ETH merge right now. So HUD 8 puts up all that capital and then they go under, NVIDIA's stuck with all those chips. So I think that as long as if we get one of these other tokens that gets a huge amount of growth, I think you'll probably see more of that kind of thing because they're going to make a particular deal with them that's a large, like any other large buyer. Now, does that offset the participation from us? I mean, it's just another large player, but I think that it's still they're going to only be able to buy so much. And I mean, we look at it right now, even for Ethereum, there's a ton of ASICs on there, but it was still profitable for GPU miners. It was the most profitable thing for anybody to come in.
But we're seeing the inverse of that happen on ETC right now, right? Where pretty much the GPUs aren't profitable, only the ASICs are, right? So I know like I have like the iPolo mini back here. It's still profitable, because, you know, it's whatever, 300 megahash a second at 250 watts. Whereas, you know, pretty much everything else is, you know, sub 1 megahash per watt, right? So GPU wise. So that's kind of a shift that we're seeing that's a little bit different. And then as far as like the type of GPUs that are getting sold to someone like Hut 8, I imagine it's cut down cores with something like a 170HX, cut down cores with HBM2 memory or HBM memory of some sort. The problem there is there's not a lot of memory intensive algorithms anymore, at least like purely memory intensive algorithms, right? There's Ergo, and then that's kind of it. If we look at everything else, Ravencoin will use a little bit of core, you know, all of the ProgPal uses a little bit of core. Flux uses a little bit of core, right? So there does seem to be a shift in the I guess the types of algorithms that are being utilized now across GPU mineable coins. That may put somebody, you know, that made a large purchase of memory intensive focused GPU units at a disadvantage too, right? Just some thoughts.
Yeah, but I think part of that interesting part about like the proof of useful work is going to be this kind of merger of, I think the evolution of it's going to be something that a GPU can handle from the consensus side, but when they dovetail that with a useful work, it's going to put GPUs in their own class, and it's going to that's the kind of separation factor. I think that would then bridge away any kind of purpose-built ASIC. I think it would, our largest target at that point would be the FPGAs, because technically they should be able to do everything by and large the GPU can do. It also has a high-speed memory interface, and you can get them with HBM if you design the FPGA right. That would be the largest target. But then again, even on proof of useful work, depending on what the type of work is, the bit stream could only go so far. And then you're going to want something that's a little more general purpose, like a GPU. So I think as we see that evolution, once they're able to handle that, like HPC, high performance computing in general, the stack and by design is set up in such a way that it's super hard to do what they're trying to do with proof of useful work, because that current stack right now, if you're talking weather data or computational fluid dynamics or anything that's HPC, it's as much as important to have that core with a fast ability plus a high-speed memory dovetailed with the ability to, most of those run on like a native like OS that's designed to like hedge it across like a server stack, which is looking at the fiber channel, it's using the IO. So for them to kind of separate that part of that advantage to be able to be competitive against an HPC, you would need to have that on your GPU mining rig, right? And I know that in the early days with Render, part of that testing was, can we separate these jobs in such a way that we could hand them over to a GPU miner, they could run them on their CUDA cores and stuff, and then give us back a return. And the reality is that that handler is still kind of a federated kind of process. So it's like, what if you were breaking all those chunks out, kind of like study at home, how do you reform them and then get your result, right? And is that any faster? While we can make up the speed of the process of you getting your bag and processing it and then sending it back to the concentrator that's handling it, it's that handoff that's the slow part right now. So as we start to see that kind of form, which I think we'll get there, because at the end of the day, the incentive is there. There's 7+ million GPUs that are going to be looking for a job. And they know that they're there. So we have that factor that we know GPUs are out there and they're ready for work. And there's a pretty large amount of community that knows how to configure stuff, and they have the financial incentive to do that. So I think we'll start to see some options here now, finally, because it's hard to focus on that when Ethereum was there, right? Because it's like, this is cool, but I'm just going to keep it pointed here because it's one that's the least line of resistance and it's making money. Now you have to actually show up to work and figure out, like, okay, how do we make this function? Because you do have that opportunity cost of all this sunk cost that people have on GPUs. So I think there's enough incentive out there for people to build that, right, and to nurture that part of it. So we'll see. I mean, I think this gives way to those kind of opportunities, and we'll see. Again, I'm cautiously optimistic that this will move forward.
I think though, going back to your kind of barrier to entry into cryptocurrency mining in particular, I think the proof of useful work kind of negates that to a certain extent. Because now, like if we're talking about high powered computing, your investment costs, like just in the server stack alone, you're talking about like 40K before you even get to GPUs. And that's probably like relatively low end right now. I mean, this is the stuff I used to build out, right? That's what I did for a living. So I'm aware of like kind of where the pricing is. And like, if we're talking about that kind of barrier to entry for a single rig with maybe that can hold, 6 to 8 GPUs at the end of the day, right? Something that maybe you would see in like a architecture firm or something like that. You're looking at near 100K, and that's one rig racked in on a 4U probably, or something along those lines. And then if after that type of investment, you're really going to be looking at wanting to seriously invest in all the proper power, all the proper battery backups, all that sort of stuff. So you're just going to skyrocket your cost, and your barrier to entry goes like way up.
That's if they try to keep the stack the same as it is right now.
Right.
I think the advantage is where you have that kind of separation. I mean, Flux is doing it right now, or they're trying to do it right now with the tiering of taking the reward and splitting it between the node providers and then the GPU miners.
Right.
So essentially you're taking that blade that would be in that cloud architecture, and you're taking the compute and storage side of the stack, and even some of the ingress, egress, like networking side of it, and you're separating it to a node provider, which will spend the money on the because it's going to be a staked thing where they're putting in X amount of whatever coin, plus they're going to have this larger clustered server that doesn't have to have the compute side on the GPU side. That's going to be reliant on the GPU miners, right? So now you can have a handful of those clustered servers, and then those are handling that part of it. That's a higher cost. It's kind of like a Filecoin server. If you look at the specs of that, it is essentially a very high-end server to handle storage. You take that from a node structure, and then you're kind of bifurcating that the compute side of the GPUs across that entire stack of all the GPU miners. So
right.
It's kind of separating the HPC into two different environments. And I think you incentivize the node providers which will be a lot less, but then you have this huge amount of compute on the GPU side that could be divided up over amongst a range of people. So then you wouldn't have to have like what you're saying, and I hear you, on where you'd have to have that big CPU, Optitron or some other kind of high-end CPU, high-end motherboard, redundant power supplies,
you need an epic CPU
channel
with all that. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I do have like a couple. I wanted to redirect back to the merge, specifically in relation to Ethereum and some of the concerns surrounding centralization. See if you share any of those concerns, and specifically as it pertains to censorship, right? So there's a couple points. I feel like from my perspective, there are multiple points of failure in regard to censorship right now with Ethereum, as far as the potential for censorship as we move in from proof of work to proof of stake. Some of them are related directly to the move to proof of stake. Some of them are not, right? So for example, one of the moves here that would I would bring up, of course, would be the Flashbots MEV and kind of their participation within the sanctions, right? But then outside of that, also, we have to talk about the centralization of the actual nodes on AWS, where we have 40% currently on AWS, with probably another 20% coming from Hetzner here soon, as they've banned, of course, the nodes from their end. So for this last 10 minutes that I got you for, just kind of wanted to get your thoughts and ideas on that as we move into the merge.
Yeah, I mean, I think even the strongest of proponents for Ethereum merge 2.0, the evolution of Ethereum, are pointing it out, right? I think they realize the ceremonious event that's occurring right now. They're there. now that they've walked through that veil and they're like, we may have an issue, right? So they're seeing the risk that a lot of people have been pointing out, but has been, I think, covered up in that kind of signal noise issue where they weren't wanting to hear it. But the data's out there showing that there is an existential risk now, that the incentive, and it's, I look at things, I like to think of most things are not necessarily set up from a sinister or malicious way. I think it's people by and large take the least line of resistance as possible, just because we're all busy, right? We all have lives, we have families, we have all this stuff, and this goes for everybody. So then when they look at like, okay, this is the way you set up a proof of stake node, here, let's build this easy how to. Most people went there and was like, click a few things, add some ETH, here we go. And then it ends up centralizing by design, because they were showing people how to go to Lido or a few of these others, or Coinbase sets up a structure and allows people just to take stuff that's already in there and just move it in there, and move their Ethereum over to a staked system there. And then what you end up having is a very quick centralization or federation over just a couple of the clouds that are out there. And then, there's been a few, pictures and reports that came out that shows, 60+% is sitting on the world's clouds. And do we run an existential risk that if Gensler or anybody from the government comes out and says, you know what, like proof of stake, we peeled it back, this mechanism may require you to do some KYT of some sort, or try to declare certain things, and if not, then we will provide a sanction or a requirement on the cloud providers to kind of hit them with a subpoena. It's not changing the laws, it's just putting a subpoena out to the cloud provider. And I'm going to tell you, the cloud provider is hosting a lot of other people's stuff, not just Ethereum nodes, and they're going to go, that's unfortunate. You need to provide us some more information on all your owners. So if it's a provider that's a third party providing for all these other ETH nodes, and then they come down with hey, we got this request that we need more information from you, and now everybody has to declare who they are, then it's essentially doxing everybody. They may I want to pull that, when now you can't withdraw. So now you're probably having to liquidate it into ST. So it creates this huge risk that if anything from, not just government, but just in general, you have this centralization that's occurred because of things trying to be as lean as possible. Part of that, I think that is one of its biggest existential risk, is that could the government or somebody pull a parlor on them and shut them down one day? Could they shut off nodes or services? Right.
Well, they could, right? I mean, historically, it's very clear that, even if the government decides that they want something shut down, they can go to Amazon and say, hey, we want this shut down, and Amazon will adhere to that, right? So,
or the cloud service provider, which is happening right now with one of them, right?
Right.
Of saying,
yeah,
hey, no, this violates our price, our services, and
part of that was because of the way the German regulations work, and they could be financially responsible for transactions that run across their servers. That was my understanding, which seemed absolutely insane to me. I would hate to have a data center in Germany, but,
that's reading a little much too far into it. I mean, it's a kind of the same. There's this very gray area when it comes to, and it's not even cryptocurrencies. It's just any kind of monetization of tokens of any sort. I mean, if you look at the same thing, the same argument could be called out in the Steam stores, right? So like if you get skins and there's a whole Steam trade thing, but they keep it internal, and you can buy, you get Steam credit and can buy a game. But at the end of the day, you're selling stuff, right? And if you read the laws, at least for the U.S. and the IRS, states that if you've gained some kind of, you've sold something, you're supposed to declare it. Well, if you had the Steam store and you're doing that, so it's how they read it and how they want to react to it, and it's within their terms of service, and they can make a quick reaction. So if something comes out from, and it goes so much further than just the bigger government. It could be local. It could be like New York. Like New York did some things with miners that caused an impact. Washington recently just did an excise tax on, like, everybody had kind of locked quote unquote rates, and you had all this transmission, everything's locked in, and then the state comes in and slaps in, another 10%, 20% tax.
That was why one of those large crypto firms moved from being a crypto mining farm to being a high powered computing data center, right? I remember that story. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're making a pivot to like, well, we do other things too, and we're not as classified as this. And, there is some nuance in that. But even with that, and that's showing also that it can affect the proof of work in some ways, right? Not just proof of stake in one thing. The difference is proof of work is spread out everywhere. So that that wasn't just Amazon shutting down in Washington or something like, and this could affect, 60% of the network. If Amazon it gets pushed into a corner with making a decision. And I mean, I know I've said this on Twitter a few times to them. I'm like, if you think Amazon, I mean, it's not always great that Google put, the merge calculator out there for them all and all that, but if they get a subpoena and they get pushed, like, their care factor is going to be fair weather very quickly. Like, they're just going to be like, we got a lot of other stuff to do, and we're not going to fight this battle for you. It's on the cryptos to fight that battle. And they're just going to stop services for a little bit. I mean, Google's turned off ads before for all crypto. They're just like, you know what? Don't want to deal with it. And then they just make that call and it ends up being a headline. And then you see all the trends and everything take a hit, right? When that happens, that could be the same thing for some of these proof of stake nodes. And that's one of the disadvantages of, I think, any of them that are cloud hosted, right? Because it's not going to be just Ethereum, it's Polkadot, it's everything, Cardano, anybody that's hosted in that fashion, it's going to be a one fell swoop across the stack, right? So, anytime I talk about that kind of stuff, I know the proof of stake, you're just bringing doom. I'm like, no, man, like, this is just, it's like, in good due diligence in any kind of operation, you look at your risk and assumptions. And then you operate at something called, if you're in a gray space, you always operate at risk. We operate as risk as GPU miners, knowing that at any point, the highest, most profitable thing, the developers can influence the space to say, hey, we're going to go do this. And then if the node providers agree with that, we are adversely affected, right? So we operate at risk. We took risk when we bought GPUs. We took risk when we participate on that. It's the same way that the proof of stake providers we're helping them try to understand that, hey, you are at risk, right? 60% of you are sitting on this one thing. We don't have that kind of issue right now. Well, Bitcoin did in China for a little bit, but it quickly reacted and was able to respin back up here in the US and a few other areas. But,
right.
The resiliency of that could affect the network, right? And as people are going to get slashed, it's a deterministic systems have to have some kind of penalty built into them, where proof of work was just like, oh, well, I get more coins because I'm allowed to stay on and somebody else has to turn off, right? So we have a natural healing network where you have this other thing that penalizes you for it. So I don't know, man. We'll see. I think, to answer your question, the shortest form, yes, I think that's going to be, I think we're going to see it coming up in the next few weeks as they start to see how it settles, provided everything hits finality and they don't have any kind of salon.
Oh, I knew it was coming. I wanted to say something. There's supposed to be 30-minute calls, and I only have 40 minutes because of the, Michael, I want to have you back on. If you want to come back on later tonight too, come back on. Make sure you guys go follow Bitsby Trippin and subscribe to his YouTube channel down below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to go ahead and check out more videos here, or of course, subscribe. For additional content that also goes into more opinionated pieces surrounding the politics around crypto, make sure you check out sonofatech.locals.com. There you can become a member for free, or even choose to support for basically additional content at $5 a month. It's helping me stay alive through the crypto winter.